What if I told you that beneath the dust of a modern construction site in northern Israel, archaeologists stumbled upon objects that hadn't seen daylight in over 3,000 years? Objects so significant that they're rewriting what we know about ancient Canaanite religious practices. Welcome back to KSC Everyday Channel. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most fascinating archaeological discoveries of recent times. A discovery that happened not in some remote desert or hidden tomb, but right alongside a highway construction project near one of the ancient world's most legendary cities, Megiddo. This is the story of a teapot-shaped vessel with a ram's head, mysterious offerings buried in the earth, and the incredible window they provide into life during the late Bronze Age. So grab your trowel and brush because we're about to unearth history together. Picture this. Construction crews are preparing to build a new road in northern Israel, near the archaeological site of Tel Megiddo, a place mentioned in ancient texts and known in biblical tradition as Armageddon. The Israel Antiquities Authority, as they routinely do before major construction projects, sends in a team of archaeologists to survey the area. What they found was absolutely extraordinary. Buried in the earth, untouched for approximately 3,300 years, was a collection of objects that seemed to have been deliberately placed together. The centerpiece? A stunning ceramic vessel shaped like a teapot, but with one remarkable feature. Its spout was sculpted in the form of a ram's head. This wasn't just any ordinary pottery. The craftsmanship was exquisite, the preservation remarkable. Alongside this vessel, archaeologists discovered several small bowls, carefully arranged as if they had been part of some important ceremony or ritual. But the story doesn't end there. As the team expanded their excavation, they uncovered storage jars, jugs that had been imported all the way from Cyprus, showing us the extensive trade networks of the time, and perhaps most intriguingly, a miniature ceramic model of a Canaanite temple, like a dollhouse version of the real thing. The Israel Antiquities Authority team, led by archaeologist Barak Sin and his colleagues, quickly realized they weren't just looking at random artifacts. They were looking at what appeared to be votive offerings, objects deliberately buried as part of religious practice. Now, let's take a closer look at these incredible objects and understand what they tell us about life 3,300 years ago. The ram-headed vessel is particularly fascinating. Researchers from the Israel Antiquities Authority believe this vessel served a very specific ceremonial purpose. It was likely used to pour valuable liquids, think milk, oil, or wine, either directly into someone's mouth during a ritual or into smaller vessels for consumption or religious offerings. Why a ram's head? In ancient Near Eastern cultures, rams held deep symbolic significance. They represented fertility, strength, and divine power. The ram was associated with various deities throughout the region, making it a perfect symbol for a vessel used in religious ceremonies. The Late Bronze Age, which spanned from approximately 1500 before Common Era to 1200 before Common Era, was a period of incredible cultural exchange across the Eastern Mediterranean. The Canaanites, who likely created these offerings, weren't isolated. They were part of a vast network of civilizations, including the Egyptians, Hittites, Mycenaeans, and Cypriots. The presence of Cypriot pottery at this site proves this point beautifully. These weren't locally made jugs. They had traveled hundreds of miles across the Mediterranean Sea, probably filled with wine, oil, or other precious commodities. Their presence here tells us that even ordinary people in this region had access to imported goods, or at least used them for special religious occasions. The miniature temple model is equally revealing. These small ceramic temples have been found at other Canaanite sites, and they give us invaluable insights into what larger temples might have looked like, their architecture, their layout, their sacred spaces. For people who couldn't travel to the actual temples in major cities, these models might have served as personal shrines or been used in household worship. But here's what makes this discovery truly special: the location. These objects weren't found in a temple or a palace. They were discovered in small pits near a rock outcrop in what appears to have been a more rural or agricultural area. This suggests something incredibly human and relatable. Local farmers and residents who couldn't make the journey to Tel Megiddo's city temple created their own sacred space right here using a natural rock formation as an outdoor altar. They brought their precious offerings, their imported pottery, their carefully crafted vessels, and buried them in the earth as gifts to their gods. Perhaps they were asking for good harvests, protection for their families, or success in their endeavors. 3,300 years later, we're uncovering their prayers. And there's one more surprise from this excavation. Beneath these late Bronze Age offerings, archaeologists discovered something even older: a winepress carved directly into the bedrock, dating back approximately 5,000 years to the early Bronze Age. As archaeologist Barak Tsin noted, this winepress is unique, one of very few known from such an ancient period when urbanization was first shaking take in the region. This tells us that this location wasn't just significant in the late Bronze Age, it had been an important site for human activity for nearly 2,000 years before these offerings were buried. The land remembers. Now that we understand the significance of the Tel Megiddo discovery, let's explore similar archaeological finds from around the ancient world that help us understand ritual practices, votive offerings, and religious life in antiquity. The Qumran Caves and the Dead Sea Scrolls. We start closer to home, still in Israel, with one of the 20th century's most significant discoveries. Between 1947 and 1956, a series of caves near the ancient settlement of Qumran, along the northwestern shore of the Dead Sea, yielded an extraordinary treasure: the Dead Sea Scrolls. These weren't votive offerings in the traditional sense, but they were deliberately hidden, preserved in ceramic jars and tucked into caves to protect them. Dating from the 3rd century before Common Era to the 1st century of the Common Era, these scrolls included biblical texts, sectarian manuscripts, and other writings that revolutionized our understanding of Judaism and early Christianity. What connects this to our Tel Megiddo discovery is the intentional act of preservation. Just as those ancient Canaanites carefully buried their sacred objects, the people of Qumran, likely the Essenes, a Jewish sect, deliberately hid their most precious religious texts to protect them from destruction. The Uluburun Shipwreck. Now let's venture to the coast of Turkey, near a place called Uluburun. In 1982, a sponge diver discovered something extraordinary on the seabed: the wreck of a late Bronze Age ship that sank around 1400 before Common Era, making it roughly contemporary with our Tel Megiddo offerings. The cargo of this ship was astounding. It contained 10 tons of copper ingots, 1 ton of tin, hippopotamus and elephant ivory, ebony wood, ostrich eggshells, jewelry, weapons, and pottery from across the Mediterranean world, including Canaanite storage jars very similar to those found at Megiddo. This shipwreck gives us a snapshot of the same trade networks that brought those Cypriot jugs to northern Israel. It shows us that during the late Bronze Age, the Mediterranean was a highway of commerce, culture, and ideas. The objects buried at Tel Megiddo were part of this interconnected world. The Deir el-Medina votive offerings. Moving to Egypt, we find parallels at Deir el-Medina, the village where the workers who built the royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings lived. Throughout the New Kingdom period, particularly from the 15th to 11th centuries before Common Era, these workers created their own sacred spaces and buried votive offerings to various gods. Excavations at Deir el-Medina have uncovered thousands of votive stelae, carved stone slabs, along with pottery, figurines, and other offerings. Many of these were deposited not in grand temples, but in small local shrines and sacred caves around the village. This parallels our Tel Megiddo discovery beautifully. Just as those Canaanite farmers couldn't always travel to the city temple, the workers at Deir el-Medina created accessible sacred spaces where they could make their own offerings and communicate with the divine. The Temple of Apollo at Delphi, home to the famous oracle, was one of antiquity's most important religious sites. From the 8th century before Common Era onward, pilgrims from across the Mediterranean world traveled to Delphi to consult the oracle and make offerings to Apollo. Archaeological excavations at Delphi have uncovered tens of thousands of votive offerings, bronze and ceramic vessels, figurines, jewelry, weapons, and even life-size statues. These offerings were buried in pits around the sanctuary when the temple treasuries became too full or during periodic cleanings. What's particularly interesting is that archaeologists have found evidence of offerings dating back to the Mycenaean period, roughly contemporary with the Late Bronze Age in Canaan. This shows that the practice of burying votive offerings in sacred locations was widespread across the eastern Mediterranean world. The Etruscan votive deposits at Gravisca. In central Italy, at the ancient port of Gravisca, archaeologists have excavated an extraordinary Etruscan sanctuary dating from the 7th to 4th centuries before Common Era. This sanctuary was dedicated to several Greek and Etruscan deities, reflecting the cultural mixing of the region. Excavations uncovered thousands of votive offerings buried in pits around the sanctuary: ceramic vessels, miniature ships, figurines, and inscribed objects. Many of these offerings were related to maritime trade and safe passage, as Gravisca was a major Mediterranean port. What makes this relevant to our discussion is the variety of offerings and their deliberate burial. The Etruscans, like the Canaanites before them, understood that offering valuable objects to the gods, whether buried, burned, or otherwise permanently removed from human use, was a way to communicate with and honor the divine. The Vindolanda tablets and offerings. Now, to something completely different but equally fascinating. Vindolanda was a Roman auxiliary fort near Hadrian's Wall in northern England. Excavations at this site have uncovered not only the famous Vindolanda writing tablets, thin wooden postcards with ink preserved in waterlogged soil, but also evidence of ritual practices and votive offerings. Among the finds are small altars dedicated to various Roman, Celtic, and Germanic gods, along with offerings of coins, jewelry, and miniature weapons. What's particularly interesting is the cultural mixing evident at Vindolanda. Roman soldiers serving far from home maintained their traditional religious practices while also adopting local British customs. This reminds us that religious practice in the ancient world was often flexible and syncretic. The Canaanites at Tel Megiddo were likely influenced by Egyptian, Syrian, and other neighboring cultures, creating their own unique blend of religious traditions. The Athenian Agora wells. Finally, let's return to the classical world and examine the ancient Agora of Athens. Throughout the 5th to 2nd centuries before Common Era, several wells in the Agora served as deposits for votive offerings and ritual materials. Archaeologists have recovered tens of thousands of objects from these wells: ceramic vessels, figurines, lamps, coins, and even curse tablets inscribed with spells. Many of these objects were deliberately broken before being thrown into the wells, a practice known as ritual killing, destroying an object to fully dedicate it to the gods and prevent it from being retrieved or reused. This practice has parallels across many ancient cultures, including the Canaanites. At some Bronze Age sites in the Levant, archaeologists have found deliberately broken pottery and objects in ritual contexts,
suggesting that the act of breaking might have been part of the offering ceremony itself. What all these discoveries, from the ram-headed vessel at Tel Megiddo to the votive wells of Athens, from the Sacred Cenotes of Chichen Itza to the sanctuary at Delphi, show us is a universal human impulse, the desire to communicate with something greater than ourselves, to give something precious to the divine, and to mark important places and moments with physical offerings that transcend ordinary time.
The late Bronze Age votive set discovered near Tel Megiddo is more than just a collection of ancient pottery. It's a window into the spiritual lives of people who lived over 3,000 years ago, who farmed these lands, who traded with distant Cyprus, who couldn't always reach the grand temples of the city, but found their own ways to honor their gods. Every time we uncover such a discovery, we're reminded that the past isn't really past. It's still here, buried beneath our roads and buildings, waiting to teach us about the timeless human experience. If you enjoyed this deep dive into ancient archaeology and history, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more explorations of humanity's incredible past. Let me know in the comments which of these discoveries fascinated you most and what ancient mystery you'd like us to explore next. Until next time, keep digging into history.